So when I was in college, I worked in the little dining hall, the little dining commons, basically, the place where they serve food to the students. That was kind of like my little student job. And one day the cook says, "Hey, D, I want you to run to the back and get some meat out of the freezer." So I go to the back, and I get this pack of meat. It was like hamburger patties or whatever. And I'm looking on it, and it says grade D, but edible. And I was like, what? I'm a kid at this time, probably like 18 or so. I had never seen something like this. I'm like, I go to the cook and I said, "Hey man, grade D, but edible?" He's like, "Yeah, it's not the best meat in the world. It's not of the best quality, but it's edible." Let's get to the movie review. What's up, everybody? Derek Anderson, the DA, and this is my review of Morbius. It is the latest Sony Spideyverse film, directed by Daniel Espinosa. It stars Jared Leto, Matt Smith, Adria Arjona, Jared Harris, as well as Tyrese Gibson. So what did I think of this movie? Well, my initial out of the box reaction, you can check that above. Me and T did a out of the theater review, and you can kind of see my initial reactions. As I'm sitting back and thinking about this film, trying to figure out what do I want to say in my official review. I would say it's a movie of missing parts. It's like something was missing in this. It's like parts of this movie didn't really connect to other parts of the movie. You got a lot of wasted characters, you got a lot of wasted actors. It reminds me of a meal that you didn't really want to eat, but since you're hungry, you got to eat something, right? Like, think about this. Like, you're hungry, it's like, man, I want a steak, I want some potatoes, I want some nice fresh vegetables, I want to cook all of that up. You go in the refrigerator, you open it up, it's like, man, all I got is like bologna and ramen, and like some tap water. Okay, well, that'll do. You're hungry, right? That'll do. You have to eat something, and that'll do. And that's what we got with this. This is just kind of like Sony dusted off, okay, origin story template number 5. Let's go out there and make this thing. And that's what we're getting from Sony right now. That'll do filmmaking. We're really not trying to put anything interesting. It's like nobody had a really unique idea or, kind of inspiration or some kind of vision of what they wanted this Morbius to be. It's not like somebody says, "Hey man, I know exactly what I would want to do with a Morbius movie. I got the best idea possible. Let me make the movie that I've been dreaming of making. I love this character." It's none of this, okay? It is, we need to make a movie about this character because we are trying to build a universe. That's what we're doing here, and that's what you're getting out of this, okay? Now, there are some good things about this film. Number one, the acting. I mean, they got good actors to act in this film. I don't know how, but they got it done. Jared Leto actually does a really good job. Matt Smith does an excellent job. He's actually the standout. Adria Arjona, she does a pretty good job too. She has like a familiar face, and I was trying to remember, like, where have I seen her from? I was like, oh yeah, she was in Triple Frontier. She was in that Netflix movie. That's where I've seen this face before. She does a pretty good job. Jared Harris, I should say, and Tyrese Gibson, I don't know why they're in this film. I don't know how they got talked into this. Great, good actors mostly, and yeah, this film, they're just basically underused. Nevertheless, they do a decent enough job while they're in there. The acting is pretty decent. As far as the movie itself, it does actually begin decently as well. It's not a bad beginning. You have Jared Leto on the hunt looking for cures to his situation, his condition. And then he's like approaching this kind of cave with these bats. That's a good way of starting this thing. It's like, okay, you're kind of immediately thrown into what's going on and you're trying to figure this thing out. And then they do a little bit of a flashback where they show him and his buddy as young men or as young teenagers, and you're like, okay, this is kind of interesting. You're kind of seeing their friendship develop. But after that, it kind of fizzles quick, and we get, like I said, into this typical origin story that we've seen a million times. Like, if you remember Marvel films from the pre-MCU era, okay? So I'm talking like 2004, 2005, up until, the MCU drops in 2008. You had films like the original Daredevil with Ben Affleck. You had that Ghost Rider film with Nick Cage, a couple of them actually. You got that Punisher Warzone, you got Elektra. Those are the movies that Marvel was making back then, and that's what this film feels like. It feels like it's right in there with those films. very, you know, shaky on the writing. They don't really do much with character development. The plot is just bare bones, cookie cutter type stuff. Yeah, that's what Sony has given us. That's what really makes it a disappointing film for me. The universe that they're trying to build feels forced. It feels contrived. It feels like, okay, we got to get these characters introduced so that we can go ahead and get to the next thing. And you really get that out of the end credit scene. It is absolutely ridiculous how poorly thought out their universe is. I don't understand why they're continuing to, you know, they've been standing. Think about this. Sony has been standing like side by side with Marvel, the MCU, the creators of this whole, you know, cinematic universe thing, while they've been making the Spider-Man films. You would think that Sony standing side by side with Marvel for these, you know, few Spider-Man films would figure a couple of things out and start getting them right. Like the Venom movies aren't necessarily, you know, drawn well. They're all right, but they're not the best films. And then this is a lesser version of that. So that's the problem that I really have with this film. It's not so much that it's a bad movie. It's just a, you know, generic, bland kind of movie, and it's really nothing to this. And it's like they're just serving this up to us because, hey, we need to build our little cinematic universe too. We're gonna serve you this plate of generic, you know, ho-hum, ordinary storytelling because we're trying to build it up to the next one, and then you guys will flock in to see our big event film, whatever that's going to be. It looks like the Sinister Six is going to be involved. Okay, you know, build it up properly, build it up with good storytelling. As far as the bad is concerned, I think it is a incomplete film. Like I said, it's a movie of missing parts. It's like it doesn't really connect. There's like characters that are introduced and they kind of just disappear off the screen. You don't know why, you don't know what happened to them. It's like, okay, this person was important enough to talk about in the first few minutes of the movie. It never comes back to this character. We don't know what happens. It's just like, what was the point of that? You have a fake out, obviously, with Adrian Toomes. Like, that's the biggest sin to me, is that you have characters that you have pushed in the trailer over and over and over, making us think, okay, this person is going to be a big part of the film. Ultimately, this person is just washed out. He's a post-credit scene now. And to me, that was the cheapest move from this film. The CGI is laughable. There's really, you know, nothing to be said. You know, it's like he has this kind of Nightcrawler poof effect every time he disappears somewhere. You see like the little Nightcrawler smoke every time he's kind of jumping around and moving or whatever. You know, again, 2005, 2006 era, you know, special effects. You know, again, it's just laughable. And then, like I said, the story is just paper thin. Like, there's the characters are wasted. You know, this thing could have really used like a strong script doctor to kind of give it some punch. It needed some pizzazz. You know, you have characters everywhere, again, with no meaning, no purpose other than just to serve like the plot, I guess. You know, hey, the plot needs like mercenaries right here because we got to have people to kill, so let's put some mercenaries in. And yeah, is there an explanation for it? Sure, I guess you could make an explanation. Is it a good one? No. So, you know, that's what you have here. You have paper thin, you know, just writing is just not where it should be at this level of the game. You know, if this again is back in 2006, you can kind of forgive it. It's like, hey, comic book films, you're kind of still, you know, feeling our way through these things. You know, really hadn't even gotten a great comic book film with the exception of Spider-Man 2 at that point in time. You know, now 16 years later, okay, we've had a million examples of how to do this thing properly, and you're still just rolling out, you know, some old junk, you know. So yeah, disappointment is really the word that I would say for this film. But let me go ahead and get to the scoreboard, and so we can break this down a little further. All right, Morbius, here we go with the scoreboard. Let's see what we got. First up, direction. So this was directed by Daniel Espinosa. He directed another movie that I saw called Life. I thought that was a pretty good movie. And then this one, I'm just gonna say it feels very studio-ish. It feels like, hey, it's not original. It's something that the studio said, this is where we're going to go with this. We just need somebody to direct it. Oh, Daniel, you want to come in? All right, come on through. And we're going to have you direct this movie. We're in complete control of this thing. We just want you to, you know, make sure that we have a competent looking film. I mean, it's a competent film. I can't really blame him because, like I said, this thing feels like it was rolled off of an assembly line from circa 2006. You know, it's very, very studio-ish. It's like the studio had its fingers and hands all in inside of this thing. It's bland, it's ordinary, and it really, like, this really needed a lot of help from the script, which it did not get. The overall look of the film and the direction is passable. You know, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about, hey, it's edible, it's food, you can eat it. Is it the greatest food in the world? No. So with the direction, and that's going to be a 5.5. All right, next up, script and story. So like I just said, this thing really needed a lot of help from the writers, and the writers really didn't deliver much. Very little character development. I mean, probably some of the just most generic type of characters that you've ever seen in a film. And I think a lot of people buy it because we're just so used to it. But they don't do anything interesting or unique with these characters. I thought the stuff that they did at the very beginning with like the kids, like as they're setting up their friendship and showing them, you know, how they've come up as friends, I thought that was fine. You know, that was good for that, and they could have continued to develop the characters in that same fashion from when they were kids. Like, hey, go back and read like the first few minutes of that part of the script and just kind of keep going in that same direction. And they really don't. You know, Matt Smith's character kind of flips for no reason. I mean, flips for a reason, but at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, you got to build up to that so it's earned. So by the time we get to Matt Smith in his full glory as the character, you've kind of earned it. And in my opinion, they just didn't. They just didn't. And I really don't like when you don't use good characters in an interesting way. You just kind of say, okay, you know, he's good, now he's not good, and we're not gonna take any, you know, like road to that. We're just gonna go from here to here, and there it is, you know. So fortunately for Matt Smith, you know, he can't work wonders, you know, and he can't insert things into the movie that just aren't there. So I'm gonna go ahead and give the script and story a 4. All right, so next up, acting. Now, as I've said, acting was actually pretty good given the circumstances. You know, what they were dealing with is just, like I said, a very bare bones script, a very unoriginal, uninspired characters, and it shows. And for them to actually do the job that they did in this film is actually pretty remarkable. Jared Leto is a great actor, and you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, he's, you know, now he's in the second worst, you know, he's in a bad DC film, now he's in a bad Marvel film. And look, whatever you want to say about Suicide Squad, he actually did the job here. You know, you may not like his Joker, but this one, he actually does the job. He does a lot of physical acting. You know, he's walking around with these little crutches and everything like that. I thought he did great. I believed him, and you never took me at one point in time out of the movie to start thinking, man, I don't like the way this guy is acting. I don't buy this character. No, I bought him each and every time, whether he was Morbius the monster or Morbius the doctor. I bought him. So, and then the other actors, everybody else did great. I'm gonna go ahead and give acting an 8. All right, and then finally, sights and sounds. This to me is probably one of the worst things about it, because you had, you know, first of all, it was a cinematic looking movie. It looked cinematic. You know, you can, you know, the shots of, you know, New York City at night, throughout the daytime, all of that is shot very well. Like I said, the director Espinosa does a competent job. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But then you get to things like the CGI, and the CGI, like I said, it's laughable. You know, you got the night crawler, poof poof, you know, as he's kind of darting around here and there. It's just a joke. And then you get to the soundtrack. Like I was telling you in the out of the theater reaction, like, you know, like there's a lot of Dark Knight riffs that just come through this thing. Like Morbius is walking around and you could just say, like, is this a Batman movie? Because the riffs are identical. You know, I don't know if they just copied the original soundtrack from The Dark Knight, or if somebody just actually went ahead and composed their own sound-alike soundtrack, but it's just embarrassing. Like, come on, you have millions of dollars, go get a good solid soundtrack that fits this particular character. What's so hard about that? Like, I was just very disappointed in the way the soundtrack looked, the special effects looked. We're in 2022. I know this movie was made in 2020, but the special effects and the soundtrack, they could have did a much better job. But you know, nevertheless, cinematic enough to be passable. I'm gonna go ahead and give that a 5. And then final score. Whew, this is like, you know, one of the tougher ones to grade. But when you do the math, it comes up to a 5.5. So not the worst movie of the year by far. I already said that. I didn't think it was. And then, you know, as I'm calculating, I'm like, yeah, it's really not that bad. And, you know, there's some things that, you know, I got out of it, especially the actors. But, you know, unfortunately, when you're trying to do a cinematic universe, you know, you need to build these things up slowly. And I hope Sony, you know, takes a lesson from some of the bad criticism that this film is getting. And they start to look, you know, okay, if we're going to do this, if we're going to, you know, really have the cinematic universe, we're going to have to do a lot better on that. All right, but tell me what you think, folks. Did you like Morbius? Did you think this was a good movie? Did you have a good time? Did you enjoy it? Go ahead, jump down in the comments. Give me your thoughts on the film. All right, so that'll do it for the review. And let's go ahead and check out the overall scoreboard for all the films that I've seen thus far this year. All right, folks, here we go. There you got it. Morbius checking in at number 10. You know, I'm hoping some of these newer movies are going to start kind of rising up the charts. As you see, the last couple of movies, Lost City, Morbius, all towards the bottom half of the list, which isn't a good sign. You know, I actually have more films rated under a 7. 7's kind of like my middle ground. So a 7.0 would just be kind of a pretty good movie, good solid movie. And most of these films are underneath that, you know. So yeah, I'm hoping that I will be able to, you know, add some films to the top half of this list, starting with Sonic and Ambulance, which will be dropping next weekend. So yeah, keep your fingers crossed. Let's hope that we get some good movies coming out next week. All right, folks, I want to thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.